When you're running a full transfer drill, you want to have high fidelity to the transfer process. And sometimes when we are talking about clinical simulation and emergency drills, people think that high fidelity drills means really keeping fidelity to a clinical emergency. So things like having fake blood and having expensive mannequins that can breathe or have computerized vital signs. And those can be important for training people in life-saving skills. But actually, when you're running a full transfer drill, it's much more important to keep fidelity to the transfer process. And it's less important to have a high fidelity clinical scenario where there's blood pumping and a patient non-responsive. You can have just a regular volunteer playing the patient, and you can have a relatively simple clinical emergency unfold. You're really trying to test the transfer process. There's enough complexity there and enough opportunity to learn and do quality improvement just from things like activating the transfer system, calling 911, doing the handoffs when the EMS arrives, loading the patient onto the ambulance, knowing the roles and responsibilities of people during the transport, knowing the transport destination and where to bring the patient and who's going to meet you there. There's just a lot of moving parts to a real emergency transfer that you can keep the clinical scenario itself relatively straightforward and simple. So we work with a lot of teams that are like, give us more to work with, give us a more chaotic clinical scenario. And we're like, that's not what you need. And we hear time and again, the important thing was to come together and step up the transfer process and keep fidelity to what does it feel like to have to give rapport while you're preparing your patient for transfer, while you're making sure that the door is open and the facility is accessible and that you've called ahead. There are just many parts that unfold. And that is what we are testing in a full transfer drill. And it is less important that you have a mannequin or the exact accoutrements of true emergency from a clinical standpoint.